The Treasurer Joe Hockey delivers his second budget, pledging a boost for small business, a welfare crackdown and mounting deficits.
The budget empowers small business to invest, grow and create jobs.
Shadow Treasurer Chris Bowen backs the small business package but disputes some of Joe Hockey's numbers. Devastated Nepal, hit by two more powerful earthquakes, dozens of people killed and more than 1,000 injured. And it's on again for Essendon. World anti-doping authorities decide to appeal against the decision, clearing 34 past and present footballers. Hello, you're watching ABC News. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Well, the government wanted to put the political horrors of last year's budget behind it, and early reaction suggests Joe Hockey has succeeded in buying some breathing space for himself and the Prime Minister. Gone are the references to a budget emergency. In its place, there's a focus on fairness. The Treasurer has forecast a deficit of $35 billion, with that going down each year until a projected return to surplus in 2019. That's based on an assumption that the worst is behind us and economic growth is going to pick up over the next 5 years. With iron ore prices down significantly, the government is hoping that growth will come from small business. It's cutting tax by 1.5% for businesses turning over less than $2 million. Small businesses that aren't incorporated will get a general tax cut of 5%. That was flagged before the budget, but the instant asset write-off was a surprise. The government's lifting the limit on tax deductions for small businesses from $1,000 to $20,000. One example which shows the change from last year's budget is the approach to youth unemployment. The contentious 6-month waiting period for the dole is gone. Instead, there's a $330 million package to help provide training, counselling and job placements for young Australians. But has the Treasurer solved a short-term political problem at the expense of addressing long-term issues with the budget? Here's political correspondent Tom Miggleton.
If last year's budget was tough love, this year it's, relatively speaking, sunshine and flowers.
This budget, Madam Speaker, is the next step in our economic plan.
Lifters and leaners are gone, now the government's here to help.
The budget empowers small business to invest, grow and create jobs. This budget gives Australians the opportunity and the freedom to participate in the workforce.
There have been some cuts to welfare this year, but they've been targeted at those who can most afford to lose them. Better off pensioners will face a stricter assets test. Stay-at-home mums claiming childcare benefits will lose out, and upper-income parents who get generous paid parental leave from work won't get it topped up by the government. The plan to force young people to wait 6 months for the dole, meanwhile, has been quietly dropped.
We listened and we heard, that previous proposal for under 30s is off the table.
Small business was expecting a tax cut. They got a surprise on top of that.
From 7:30 p.m. tonight, small business can claim an immediate tax deduction for each and every item they purchase, up to $20,000.
That's giving budget watchers a sense of déjà vu.
It's like, Wayne Swan on steroids, because...
He won't like you saying that.
Oh, no, because he had that and then they ditched it and now they brought it back.
It's a bit of a Wayne Swan sort of budget. Look what Wayne Swan did. He gave small businesses an asset write-off of $6,500. Joe Hockey has given them $20,000.
Most of the Keynesians in the press gallery, they'll think is great, a bit more overspending, can't get enough of it.
The idea is if that boosted the economy, and it did for Wayne Swan, it'll do it more so now.
And there's more new spending, a $5 billion plan to develop Northern Australia and more than $1 billion to increase national security. Helping to pay for all of that, there'll be a crackdown on welfare fraud and multinational tax avoidance, as well as a plan to make backpackers on working visas pay tax. After all the money's been moved around, the budget position's broadly the same.
If you look at the savings, for example, in the next financial year, they come in, I think, at about $1.1 billion. Now, seeing they're spending about $430 billion, this is not even a rounding error.
The one thing a Treasurer does not want to do is have he presided over a recession on his tombstone.
Now, you can always look at the dark side of life. You can do that. Not me. Because you know what? I can see it and it's on the ground. People want to have a go.
The budget papers acknowledge the economy's been slower than expected to pick up slack from the end of the mining boom, but the forecast remains rosy. Economic growth's expected to rise from 2.5% now to 3.5% in 2 years' time. And the Treasurer says the plan to return the budget to surplus by 2019 is on track.
We know that we've got to continue to reduce the size of government, and we know that we've got to do it in a balanced way. But we want the economy to strengthen. We want the economy to build up momentum. And we're seeing very good signs internationally. I'm not going to overplay it, but I truly believe we are seeing some good signs internationally that will help us along the way.
With Joe Hockey looking to the future, the opposition's focused on the here and now and the $35 billion deficit booked for the year ahead.
This is a budget which sees the deficit continue to grow. It fails the government's own test. This is a budget which sees debt up, deficits up, spending up and tax up.
And the government wants to do more, injecting $3.5 billion into childcare subsidies, but only if the Senate backs cuts to the Family Tax Benefit A. That plan was in last year's budget as a straight cut to help the bottom line. What a difference a year makes. The government always planned for its first budget to be unpopular. Even so, the turnaround to this year is breathtaking in style and substance. An election budget's due next year. What more can Joe Hockey do, especially given the deficits that continue to stretch out to the fiscal horizon?
Australia has around 2 million small businesses, which translates into a lot of votes as the next election nears closer. So Late Line's Andrew Robertson went knocking on doors to find out what they really wanted from tonight's budget.
This is the industrial area of Brookvale on Sydney's northern beaches, a place where there are scores of small businesses, many of them in manufacturing. And the businesses Late Line spoke to are hoping tonight's budget will be more help to them than last year's disappointment.
I don't think there was anything in it for small business or manufacturing to sink their teeth into and be optimistic about.
James Scott runs a plastic moulding business and in recent years has had a hard time at the hands of the high Australian dollar. He's looking for help from Canberra and is encouraged by measures like the 1.5% cut to the tax rate for incorporated businesses with a turnover of less than $2 million. It
would be nice to have a little bit more change in the pocket at the end of the year. Then we could spend more money on investing in new machinery or new personnel.
Unincorporated businesses, which are the majority of small business, will get a 5% tax discount. All small businesses will be able to instantly write off assets up to the value of $20,000. PricewaterhouseCoopers small business expert Sue Presney says that's a good measure, but one that needs to be targeted towards assets that drive growth rather than just the purchase of something like a new vehicle, which the Treasurer has suggested.
Any sort of technology that's going to improve productivity and help them innovate, and equipment that they might otherwise have difficulty funding for themselves.
Sue Presney also thinks removing capital gains tax liability from small businesses who change their legal structure is an important measure because of the way many businesses are created.
We see small businesses often not getting advice in the first instance when they start up and needing to rearrange themselves fairly soon down the track, and if they've been successful, then there can be capital gains tax on the transition from one structure to another structure.
We have the installation process here, so floors down, lining's done.
Back in Brookvale, Peter Ferrugia has been making camper vans for a quarter of a century. A large part of his clientele is retired baby boomers. He's welcomed the incentives to help him entice some of those older people back to work.
They certainly bring experience, and I know the people that I deal with in our industry, they're pretty active and they've done some pretty interesting jobs, and I think in one way or another they've got quite a lot to offer to many different businesses.
An issue that's getting plenty of discussion at the moment but was not in the budget is the goods and services tax. Peter Ferrugia thinks the government should have bitten the bullet and raised it.
With a GST rise, it's certainly going to put some more money in the coffers and possibly look at the chance of reducing income tax. So people that do wish to spend have that to spend in the economy and giving benefit back to tax raising, which we dearly need at the moment.
Everyone we spoke to was in agreement that while the government's changes to childcare support are not perfect, anything that makes it easier to employ women is a good thing.
Nepal has been hit by 2 powerful earthquakes, collapsing buildings and killing at least 36 people and injuring 1,100 more. 8 people have also died in neighbouring India and another person in Tibet. The first magnitude 7.4 quake struck just near the Mount Everest base camp and was followed by a magnitude 6.3 quake and a series of aftershocks. The village of Chautara appears to have suffered the most extensive damage, with several buildings flattened. In the capital, Kathmandu, many people ran out onto the streets, terrified the buildings they were in would collapse. It comes less than a month after the nation was devastated by a magnitude 7.8 quake, which killed at least 8,000 people and damaged hundreds of thousands of buildings. Orla Murphy is Oxfam's regional humanitarian manager based in Kathmandu. I spoke to her a little earlier.
I was in our Kathmandu office and the level of fear was quite visible among colleagues who have been here at the time of the original earthquake. People left, the ground shook for 20 seconds or more. People were very, very concerned.
Now, of course, we're talking about a matter of weeks since the earthquake that killed devastatingly more than 8,000 people on the 25th of April. So I guess it's safe to assume that people were very nervous when they started to feel more tremors today.
Yes, understandably incredibly nervous, reliving something that is so current. I was speaking to our teams out in the field, and we're working in 4 districts outside of Kathmandu, and in 2 of them we've received reports of buildings that were previously damaged have now fallen down. Our team in Sindhu Palchok have shifted sort of from the focus of their work today and are now just transporting casualties to the local hospital. So it's just another wave of devastation that has impacted people who were already in desperate need of humanitarian assistance.
The Weather Bureau says it's official. We're living through an El Niño event, and it's a significant one. It's not the news farmers want to hear. The event will bring hotter temperatures and less rain, especially for those on the east coast who need it the most.
The drought is already hurting here in Longreach. Grazier Warwick Champion has already halved the number of breeding stock on his property. 40 years spent breeding, and now what's survived may have to be sold.
Our age and stage in life, it's sort of getting to a pretty serious sort of situation when you have to sell the last of your breeders.
They're already carting water here at Longway Station, and with the declaration of an El Niño, meaning less rain and warmer temperatures, the signs aren't good.
It just sounds like the knife is being twisted while it's in, and yeah, it's not a very bright outlook.
El Niños are natural climate phenomena caused by increases in water temperature in the Pacific Ocean. The last one was in 2010. Much of the east coast is already being hit with a crippling drought. This map shows the areas which have had the lowest ever or well below average rainfall in the last 3 years. And if you compare it to where El Niño tends to be felt the hardest, the outlook isn't good. But the Bureau warns every El Niño is different.
We've seen about 26 El Niño events since 1900. Of those, 17 have led to widespread drought for Australia. So in other words, about 2/3 of El Niños result in drought. 1/3, though, we get away with reasonably average conditions.
And that's something Warwick and Rosemary Champion are counting on, with this El Niño expected to last until autumn next year. Jake Sturmer, ABC News.
Queensland's Police Commissioner has been threatened with arrest unless he produces documents at a hearing into the infamous Gold Coast bikie brawl. A warrant for the arrest of Ian Stewart was sought by lawyers acting for one of the bikies charged over the riot.
It was the brawl that changed the law. And today the state's top law enforcer, Commissioner Ian Stewart, was threatened with arrest unless he produced the police diaries of the officers involved. The threat came from lawyers representing Bandido's bikie Peter Morrick, who's facing a hearing over his alleged involvement in the 2013 brawl. The court heard Morrick's lawyers issued a summons asking the Commissioner to provide the diary notes of 81 officers from the night of the brawl through to the present day. They argued the notebooks related to the credibility of the officers. The magistrate ordered that the summons be set aside, saying the lawyers were seeking matters irrelevant to the case, but he did order that any notes taken by police officers on the night of the brawl be produced. So it wasn't a fishing exercise?
I can't comment. Thank you. Thank you.
More police gave evidence at the hearing, which is expected to finish on Friday. Tom Forbes, ABC News, Gold Coast.
There are mixed feelings in the Victorian town of Anglesea tonight after aluminium giant Alcoa announced it was closing its nearby coal-fired power station. The company had tried to sell the station but couldn't find a buyer. The closure will cost the jobs of 85 workers, but local residents won't miss the coal fumes.
It's been part of the seaside town for 46 years, but the lights are going out at the Anglesea power station.
To have the sort of rug pulled out from under you this morning was, it was a bit of a shock, yeah.
The power station and adjoining coal mine, which supplied power to the now defunct Point Henry aluminium smelter, had been on the market for over a year, but falling power prices meant it was not viable.
I think people were sort of expecting it, but when you announce it, it's always a shock to people.
They are going to struggle to find jobs in their trades and their skill sets within their local communities.
Graham Kerr has worked here for 34 years.
I feel a lot sorry for the younger ones with young families, things like that. You know, they've got to have some sort of future for their families and stuff like that.
But not everyone is upset at the closure. The Surf Coast Air Action Group has lobbied for years to shut the plant.
It's a really positive story for the health of Anglesea residents and also visitors to the Surf Coast.
The lease area covers more than 7,000 hectares, backing on to a national park. The company now must clean up the area. The estimated cost of rehabilitation is in the tens of millions of dollars.
Alcoa's done a lot of rehabilitation already, and we'll continue to make sure that we return the land as best we can to what it was previously.
The power station and mine will close at the end of August. Cameron Best, ABC News, Anglesea.
The Essendon Football Club is bracing for another lengthy legal dispute after the World Anti-Doping Authority announced it would appeal against the recent judgment that cleared 34 past and present players. The appeal will be heard by the Court of Arbitration for Sport and may take several months to resolve. In the meantime, the affected athletes are free to play.
Having dipped their toes into life beyond the supplements scandal, the Bombers find they're back in it, up to their necks. WADA is taking the 34 past and present Essendon players to the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
Yeah, we're a bit shocked, I think. Everyone around the club, everyone around sort of Melbourne thought that this wouldn't happen, but it has, so we have to deal with it.
Legally, the Bombers are now back to square one.
So the case is what's called de novo, which means it starts from scratch. So that means any evidence can be called, anything can be put before the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
You can hear the skipper's exasperation.
It's going to be a difficult process, but it's not something that we haven't been through before, and the club's stayed firm, the playing group have held together. We've had incredible support from our fans.
Asada says it welcomes the appeal and will assist WADA in preparing for the case.
They may even believe that they've got a tough case in bringing the appeal, but think it's important that we have a go and that we be seen to be protecting the integrity of sport.
A three-person panel will hear the case. The entire process is expected to take several months. The better news is once the Court of Arbitration for Sport has made a decision, the supplement scandal will be over, for good. The injection regime may not have been to everyone's liking, but the Bombers maintain the players have done nothing wrong.
2.5-year investigation, a comprehensive decision to find the players not guilty by an independent tribunal. Why would that change?
But it looks like another full AFL season with talk of Essendon and injections. Guy Stainer, ABC News, Melbourne.
The southern United States has been battered by almost 24 tornadoes, which have killed at least 5 people. Rescue teams are now picking through the wreckage of several towns hit by winds of more than 200 kilometres an hour. North America correspondent Michael Vincent reports.
Destruction in seconds. The surreal view of a school's roof being ripped off.
There goes the school. That's not Casey's, that's school.
Twisters have wrought destruction across the southern US in the past 24 hours. Homes are now wreckage. The worst affected the rural town of Van in East Texas.
Approximately 30% of the city of Van has suffered damages, ranging from completely destroyed homes to downed trees and power lines.
Sniffer dogs have been out searching for trapped survivors or the dead.
We didn't hear the sirens, my son did. This is his room? Or it was his room?
In Arkansas, 2 parents were killed protecting their 18-month-old girl in their mobile home hit by a tornado. She was unscathed. The storms also brought torrential rains. Some parts were hit by up to 27 centimetres, causing flash flooding. Rescuers risked their lives to save those stranded. These men eventually got out. This pregnant woman and her friend's baby were also winched to safety.
This time, they couldn't even get to us by boat, so it's pretty scary.
The Weather Service is predicting more storms to come. Michael Vincent, ABC News.
An Al Jazeera journalist jailed in Egypt with Australian Peter Grester is suing his employer for $127 million compensation. Mohammed Fahmy claims the satellite network was negligent and supported blacklisted Islamists. An appeals court has ordered a retrial, saying the original verdict was not supported by evidence.
Facing a retrial and out on bail, a defiant Mohammed Fahmy called a news conference in Cairo.
I am here to announce that I will set the record straight and put Al Jazeera on trial in Canada's top court.
The Canadian-Egyptian journalist blames his employer for the predicament that resulted in him spending more than 400 days in jail, with Australian Peter Grester and Egyptian producer Bahar Mohammed.
The network not only deceived us journalists, breached contract, and acted negligently toward us before the arrest, they also failed to reimburse me for my full legal fees.
That the court in Canada order Al Jazeera to pay $100 million in punitive and remedial damages.
The original trial found the 3 men guilty of being part of a terrorist group and airing falsified footage, and sentenced them to 7 and 10 years in prison. Earlier this year, Peter Grester was freed and deported. From London, Mr Grester said he's not involved in the Canadian lawsuit and is focused on the upcoming retrial, and that there is no evidence to substantiate any of the charges. The case highlights the growing dangers journalists face.
I don't remember the world being so cruel to us journalists, with more than 200 journalists around the world jailed and 60 killed in 2014.
The Al Jazeera network has defended its actions and says if Fahmy wants to seek compensation from anyone, it should be from his jailers. Michael Troy, ABC News.
In the NRL, South Sydney halfback Adam Reynolds could miss another 2 months of football after injuring his thumb against the Dragons last night. The match was Reynolds' first game back from a serious knee injury. He's now likely to be sidelined with a broken thumb.
Yeah, it's a massive impact for us. You know, he's just organisation. He's, you know, for being out for so long and coming in and staying calm, and the way he controls that game with his kicking. You know, it's probably what we've been missing in the last few weeks.
Reynolds' inclusion last night helped the Rabbitohs to a 16-10 win over the Dragons. The Premiers had struggled without their star playmaker, losing all 3 games in Reynolds' injury absence. Football Federation Australia is under fire for failing to secure a bigger venue for this Sunday's A-League Grand Final. Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory are going head-to-head this weekend, which holds in a stadium which holds 30,000 people. Fans and players say they're disappointed that just a fraction of the tickets have been set aside for Sydney supporters. Joanna Woodburn reports.
It's been a 5-year wait for Sydney FC to make it to a grand final. But for many fans, they'll be waiting a lot longer to be part of the action.
I think it's pretty pathetic. I think it's the FFA's fault.
I know a lot of us missed out, but you know what, what can you do?
It's a balls up on all sides, really, I think, but to be fair.
Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory have been relegated to Melbourne's Amy Park. It holds 30,000 people, almost half of the capacity of the preferred Docklands Stadium, which is already booked by the AFL. The AFL was asked to set aside the larger venue last year. When the grand final was pushed back a week, it said it was too late.
We spent many months looking to resolve it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that.
Just over 3,000 tickets have been allocated for Sydney fans.
As a player, you want to play in those big stadiums with crowds that are full. So it's disappointing.
But I think it hurts Melbourne Victory more than us because you know, they are the home team and, you know, they're getting robbed of 20,000 people of support behind them.
With so few seats available, some fans are looking to scalpers, with tickets being offered for up to 4 times the price.
It comes with the fact that we're playing at Amy Park. You know, I think it's disappointing.
Regardless of the result on Sunday, Sydney FC says it will host a Fans' Day later next week to give more of its supporters a chance to be part of the grand final. Joanna Woodburn, ABC News, Sydney.
A brilliant triple century in country cricket may not be enough to earn Kevin Pietersen a recall to the England cricket team for the Ashes. The 35-year-old hammered a career-best 326 not out for Surrey and is now averaging more than 200 since his return to country cricket.
Probably one of the best innings that I've ever played. Not just numbers, but because of how important the timing is of what's happening in English cricket at the moment, and how I've always said that I have this burning desire to play for England again.
But reports have since surfaced that England's new director of cricket, Andrew Strauss, has told Pietersen his international career is effectively over.
A pool of cold air is moving into the southeast overnight tonight, and then it'll make its way through New South Wales as we move through Wednesday. It's even bringing the potential of snow about the central and northern tablelands of that state to around 1,000 metres. But the air mass that's moving through is relatively dry, so although we'll see the potential of these isolated showers falling as snow, they're expected to be very light and patchy. Even through Victoria, most areas looking at light falls, although in around Melbourne we could see totals around 10 to 20 millimetres, and a similar scenario with the heaviest falls about the west and south of Tasmania. But wet, cold and windy across the southeast, but generally clear, dry and sunny across the remainder.
And that is ABC News for now. Thanks for your company. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Do stay with us though, the drum is up next.